among those that we can get. National Scientist Lourdes Cruz, who's going to talk about the Asean Foresight Alliance that started in 2018. By the way, she's going to announce that we have been elected as Vice President of this alliance. And then we have Professor Glenn Imbang, who has been doing scenario planning with so many groups. Dr. Segundo Romero of the Asian
and logical framework. This morning's event in particular is a great venue to help us be more enlightened on the background and approaches for the project. Now let us have National Scientist Lourdes Cruz to give us a brief presentation on the ASEAN Foresight Alliance. She attended the meeting in Malaysia last year. Ladies and gentlemen, National Scientist Lourdes Cruz.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat.
Magandang umaga po.
I'll just give you a brief background on the ASEAN Foresighting Alliance that Malaysia is leading, and why Malaysia is leading this alliance. Malaysia in 2017 put out the vision Progressive Malaysia 2050. Next. Next. Yung bang una? Okay, but actually Malaysia had 2020 vision for their vision for 2020 was for Malaysia to be a developed country by this year. And then 5 years before this, in 2015, they started looking at if Malaysia can really attain this or not. And in 2017, they put out the vision for Malaysia 2050. Okay, and so in preparation for this, they looked at the mega trends: rapid urbanization, demographic and social change, technological breakthroughs. Oop. Ano nangyari? what Malaysia did was to look at what is happening worldwide, the mega trends and then the risk, like, the climate change, all the problems that we have now. And it looked at the countries the developed countries that already have foresights. So including, I think, countries in Europe, Singapore, Japan, China, and so they said that for them to convince the Malaysian government to really invest in this foresight was to show what are the situations in the developed countries in terms of demography and population, in terms of governance and leadership, and sige. So this is, hindi makita masyado. But anyway, here, they are predicting what will happen. I think these are predictions from different sources of what will the world be in 2050. So 55% increase in water demand, 60% more food, world population of 9.7, and dadami na kami, 1.5 billion na. 1 billion live in poverty, 5.6 billion living in urban areas. Next. So ito yung global megatrends and global risk. Next. And ito yung mga countries that have the 2050 visions: United Kingdom, smart and sustainable nation; sustainable lifestyles for the European Union; Finland, sustainable development; Japan, society 5.0; China, major power in SCT; Singapore, smart nation; Australia, sustainability and social equity. Okay, next. So, and this is where the fourth revolution is happening. Fourth industrial revolution is happening. And to convince the government of Malaysia that they should support this foresighting is by comparing the data for the developed countries versus Malaysia, and they're also looking at the average indices for the different countries. And next please. Okay, it's not, when they did this, it's not only the Academy Science Malaysia that was involved, although the initiative came from the Academy Science Malaysia, but there were others, like University of Malaysia, which is the Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology, was also involved in the workshop that we attended. And so it's really a group, hindi lang iisa. No, next. And they went through this process, these usual processes in foresighting, where we are now, where we are heading for, what are the drivers to the future, what kind the future looks like, how do we achieve the desired future. And so they went through the different stages and the outputs here. Okay, next. And as a background, Malaysia did reports on science and technology, geopolitics, society and culture, and economy and finance. Okay. And so that took them a long time, to prepare the background check on these four concerns. Next. Next, please. And so they were looking also at the technology 3. They considered 95 emerging technologies. uh, and classified according to whether it's for preventive health care, for a healthy nation, disruptive technologies created for business models, reducing carbon footprint, safeguarding well-being, democratization of knowledge, and value-adding our resources and management efficiency, their resources and management efficiency. Next. And according to the Datuk Maslan Othman, so they had many groups discussing these different technologies and different aspects, preparation for the foresighting. And I think they started with the different groups all together, came up with more than 100 drivers. And then they cut it down to about 30 and finally settled on 9. So, prioritizing this. And so the 9 drivers that they considered at the end are the people and values, population and demographics, leadership and governance, talents, education and training, green and sustainable practices, urbanization and rise of megacities, economic growth and equitable distribution, and then the STI capacity and competency. And the visions, Progressive Malaysia 2050, that's sustainable, harmonious, and prosperous. Next. And so these are the trends and attributes. It's like a metabolic map. So, dami para. Okay, next, para may crib cycle doon. And this is how they envision Malaysia 2050 will be by leveraging on STI. So, hypersonic airliner, super smart grid of renewable energy, space stations, smart dust sensors, brain-to-brain communication, virtual shopping, flying cars, etc. Next. Okay. So they chose the two that they think drivers that they think are most important is economic growth and equitable distribution. That's what because without this, parang walang mangyayari, And the leadership and governance, of course, is very important. And so these are the scenarios. One, if you have the economic growth and poor leadership, you will be trapped in misery. Weak leadership and weak economy. But then if you're prosperous and you have a weak leader, you will be in a disarrayed in prosperity. Okay, and then over there is good leadership and poor economics, contented in complacency, good leadership and weak economy. And what they want to attain was this synergized in harmony with good leadership and good economy. So, and in looking at these scenarios, they also considered the unforeseen events. What if we want to attain this synergized and harmony state? What if something happens? Like if a wild card comes, like the coronavirus, ano mangyayari? Anong gagawin natin? Okay, next. And getting the act together, next please. So, in looking how they will attain the desired scenario, they look at the transformational shifts according to the different drivers. So, for example, in leadership and governance, from administrative delivery to innovative services, from post-truth decision-making to evidence-based decision-making. Hindi yung, ay, dapat pala itong ginawa. Okay, so then there's gradual governance and policies to agile and responsive governance and policies, I think, which we badly need. centralized decision-making to empowered, facilitative, and decentralized decision-making, and so on. So like in, economic growth, industry-driven economy to people-driven economy, resource-intensive to knowledge-intensive, and so on. Okay. We can, give a copy of this presentation from the Malaysian Academy to the rest of the group next. And so here are more of the drivers. So instead, in talents, instead of job seekers, job creators, that kind of transformation, more proactive. Next. So, and then they look at the collaborative networks that should be formed to bridge the innovation chasm. And so R&D to business, the collaborative network, the shared vision, will give you shared vision, lower risk and barriers, talent pools, knowledge intensification, value creation in priority areas, innovation, entrepreneurship, and meeting the market demand. Next. So this is a proposed collaborative network for their demand-driven R&D and market-driven delivery system. Okay. So they did reality checks on industry growth and challenges, industry-driven strategic plan, and what will be the outcomes that they want, and to have knowledge cluster, talent hubs, and disruptive innovation. Next. So, and then they listed the new economic opportunities, okay, in manufacturing, services, health and wellness, and the halal industry. And so those are their focus area. And these are the percentages where they are. So the services has a high percentage. Still, I think the Philippines also has a very high percentage of services. Next. And so in doing the ASM Foresight initiative, they were eyeing Industry 4 forward, National Entrepreneur Policy, National STI Policy and Master Plan, the 12th Malaysia Plan, and iConnect initiative that they have done before. So parang that gave them the base for the planning of this Foresight 2050. Next. Okay, the Foresight, ASEAN Foresight Alliance. Next. They are really, Malaysia is really trying to be one of the leaders in the, or if not the leader of the ASEAN group. And so they want to gather the ASEAN, as an economic group, because if the ASEAN were a single entity, it would rank as the 6th largest economy in the world, behind these USA, China, Japan, France, and Germany, with nominal GDP more than 2.8 trillion US dollars. Next. And so with the ASEAN community, one shared vision. So there's an ASEAN Community Vision 2025, the political security community, economic community, and socio-cultural community. One vision, one identity, and one community that the ASEAN is still struggling to have. Next. Next, please. Okay, so they also look at the plans that the ASEAN region has. So Singapore has also the 2050 Smart Nation, Malaysia, Progressive Malaysia 2050, Brunei, Wawasan Brunei 2035, Philippine Ambition 2040, and Indonesia's National Long-Term Development Plan up to 2025. So, okay, I think You have your own views about Philippine ambition, okay, and what it lacks and how it can be improved. Next. And in foresighting, foresighting is an interdisciplinary field of knowledge, a sub-discipline of future studies. The tools allow people to share, explore, and test their scenarios. And Foresight prioritizes resilience, early detection, and fast recovery. Next. And so I think I have to read this. Why Foresight? Because we are doing this now. Next. And the Foresight capacity globally. Next. So the future, there are many universities that are involved in futures study. I think Japan actually has this future design from the Research Institute of Humanity and Nature. Next. And so here they look at the capacities of the government. And actually before they did this foresighting, they went to different countries and really learned about what they've been doing. Next. And so with them finished with the Malaysia 2050, they want to lead the formation of an ASEAN Foresight Alliance. So that we can work together for one vision, one identity, and one community. Next. And the objectives are to introduce foresight methodology as tools to design ASEAN strategic planning. And this was the reason for the workshop that was held on December 11 to 13. And to use the Alliance as a platform to connect all future planning into the big picture of ASEAN's shared vision. And to use it as a platform to assist and facilitate evidence-based future planning of ASEAN members in developing their national policy strategies and action plan, and to cultivate experts among ASEAN member officials on future studies and foresight methodology. The ASEAN Foresight Alliance organized during the last day of the meeting that was held in Kuala Lumpur and elected the chairman, two vice chairs, one from chairwoman, or actually it's not, the chair is Malaysia, not the person. Okay, and the vice chairs are the Philippines and Indonesia. So that means, and we can send representative who it's not dependent on the person. Okay, and the Philippines will have a workshop, ASEAN workshop for sighting in November, and this is being organized already by our president. Rodora Sansa. Okay, and sige, this is to build the capability for sighting. Next. And these are the proposed focus area for the Alliance: sustainability, jobs of the future, technology foresight, industry 4.0, infrastructure, future business model, and future healthcare. Next. And so these are the dialogue partners: China, EU, India, Japan, Korea, Russia, the US. And these are the subcommittees in the ASEAN. Next. And the initiatives are to organize a yearly Foresight Alliance conference, and the first one will be in the Philippines in November 2020, the training program, and to connect AFA with other regional and national foresight platforms. Next, I think. So with the formation of the ASEAN Foresight Alliance, Malaysia says that this will facilitate us to achieve ASEAN shared vision. Okay, and AFA will facilitate the medium and long-term plan of ASEAN beyond 2025. And with the scenario building of Foresight studies, it will make ASEAN become more agile in facing future challenges. Even in the Future Earth program, I've been mentioning agility as something that we really need because we don't respond to emergencies due to hazards fast enough. May nababaon, hindi ma-rescue, hindi tayo makabangon. And so, next. And yeah, that's there. Thank you to us for attending the workshop. So, that's just to share with you what we heard at the meeting, and we hope we can really participate actively in this foresighting for the Philippines. So each ASEAN nation will develop its foresight, towards 2050, and then put this together, have a meeting to discuss what will be the total, ASEAN foresight. Okay, thank you.
Now, Mr. Sherman Cruz will give us a talk entitled Zoom In, Zoom Out, Anticipating Emergence via Futures and Foresight. Mr. Cruz is the director of Center for Engaged Foresight. His specialization revolves on futures-informed strategy development and foresight-driven strategic planning tools and methods. Let us give him a warm round of applause. Before we proceed, we would like to remind our speakers that you will be given 50 minutes to 1 hour each for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was a good presentation about a strategic foresight implementation in Malaysia. In fact, I am an alumni of the Academy of the University of Science Malaysia. I took my futures studies course. They had an intensive 3 weeks course back then. That was in 2012, in partnership with the World Future Studies Federation and the Right Livelihood College. So it was fun. It was really good. It was the first time that I encountered futures in foresight, and USM was one of the pioneers in Asia. And right now, of course, as we've seen there, the news headline, as far as their foresight work is concerned, is that in fact, if you try to look back, it's 50 years work. They published the first foresight literature in the 1970s. There was an event wherein the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mahathir Mohamad, invited the leading futurists of that time, and then they've asked them, to write an essay about, future scenarios of trends and uh, future of work and education, among other themes and areas. And it was awesome, that they had this literature since the 1970s. And then after my futures course, of course, the next thing I had to do is what I'm going to do with this knowledge that I have. So in partnership with my fellow, colleagues who attended that course, we set up the Center for Engaged Foresight. So it's a consortium, a network of 5 futurists in Asia. Primarily one is a professor at the National University of Singapore, at the University of Sunshine Coast, Australia, Tamkang University, me, for the Philippines. So we set up the Center for Engaged Foresight. Since then, we've been providing future studies and futures courses, facilitating workshops in literacy, to funding agencies, think tanks, in different parts of the world. And of course, looking back when I was starting Foresight and did futures work in the Philippines, it's really awesome to see now that there is a systems undertaking, systems level undertaking in integration of futures and foresight in the Philippines. now, it has become a mainstream. In fact, I have a partnership with the Asian Development Bank, the U.S. Embassy, and other funding agencies in providing support to organizations and academic communities in introducing Futures in Foresight. So yeah, that's it. That's my background. I've been a Foresight and consultant advisor for almost like 10 years now. So, yeah, I remember Mark Twain once said that you cannot depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus. He said that many, many years ago. He said that you cannot depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus. But of course, let's try to think and reflect what eyes meant. For Mark Twain, for me as a futurist, I would see it was very obvious that we use our eyes to see the world. Right? Now, in the context of the scientist, I remember Mark Twain once said, data, among other ways of knowing the world and reality, is one amongst many. Right? Data is a way of knowing reality. And then, of course, while our approach to data has been always about gathering experiences, gathering stories, trying to document and make sense of what occurs in the past, and we tried as much as we could to extrapolate that into the future, lead to the concept of prediction in policy analysis, in the firms, in accountants, amongst economists, including scientists. No? And with data linked with prediction. Prediction was primarily some sort of incentivized in the 1970s and 80s, right? So, there was money in prediction. But then again, looking back 10 years after, they realized that we've got it simply because perhaps we failed to anticipate the unknown unknowns. As if the future was something that was stable. And that made prediction really essential. But then by the year 2000, in the early 90s, they learned about this and they realized that we've got it all wrong. Now what is And that is what I'll be presenting to you now. Imagination. What is imagination? Not recently, in 2014, the UNESCO Foresight Section Chief organized a global anticipatory summit. They've invited all futurists in 2014 and 2015, and I was fortunate to be invited in that forum. And then we tried to explore and study, ways by which we could use futures in foresight to enable people to actually create the future. If people are not future literate, how might they be able, to understand and employ the future to innovate today? So UNESCO, for almost 2 weeks, we came up with the concept of futures literacy. And in futures literacy, imagination is data. Not data as we know it, but in the context of futures thinking, imagination now becomes the data. In fact, right now, the narrative has been spoken by many, no, not a few countries who have ministries of the future. or ministers of the future. In fact, the Dubai Minister of the Future now said that ideas and imagination are the commodities of the future. And what is imagination? How might imagination emerge as a data? Because when you think about the future does not exist yet. So the only way for you to understand and study the future is by using imagination as a tool, as a platform to study the invisible. Imagination as a platform can enable you to see truth in multiple levels. It enables you to understand reality at different layers, breadth and depth, vertical and horizontal. And one of the methodologies that I use when I facilitate scenarios, especially in a government context, because of course, government would always, especially, funding institutions, has to make sense to them. It's not about theory, it's not just about scenarios, but it has to make sense to them that enables them to actually create the future that they want. So reality in the context of causal layered analysis has different levels. One is the news headline. The news headline, these are pop types of reality, the reality that you hear every day on the radio, that's published, being repeated on a daily basis. That's real, right? And then, of course, you have another way of looking at things, like how the scientists and the researchers look at reality, which is systems thinking, right? We try to make sense of the things that we know and we don't know about by applying systems analysis through research, journal publication, among others. That's another layer of the reality. Then again, deeper than that are the language of philosophers. And the myth and metaphor which leads us now to the new phase to foresight, called narrative foresight, which of course, I'm going to explain later why I would, now share what anticipatory thinking and emergence is all about. Malaysia still is in the process of pushing the pedal. And we are in the process of, together with the US Embassy and some futurists at the University of Hawaii, facilitate this year, together with, this futurists and those who are involved in the Malaysian foresight, to push the pedal further from data-driven foresight to narrative foresight. Now, however, we must remember that futures thinking and future studies is a learning journey. We make sense and use of data to anticipate possibilities. But then again, from a single loop approach, data overwhelms us. Perhaps because in many workshops and conversations we've been having, we've used data, and of course the conversation were centered around problems, right? And then after you go out in the workshop, you're tired and you're pessimistic. Because the conversation was just merely about the data. But then again, some folks are asking that, how do you make sense of the data and ask the Monday morning questions, which is double loop, that makes sense to leaders and administrators and executors. If I anticipate 2050 right now, what am I going to do on Monday morning? How am I be able to link, foresight, strategic long-term thinking, to governance in the present? But then again, of course, foresight is not just about data analysis or making sense of data from a futures or foresight view. It's also about, which is now very critical in the practice of foresight, is venturing into the unknown. How might you be able to study the things that does not exist yet? And that is what future studies is all about, or futures thinking. Studying the things that does not exist yet. And then, as I've said, we are now in the phase wherein we capacitate the people who are involved in the process of creating the future to change the story. If the story that we have at this time is that, we are lagging behind, that's the current news headline as you presented to us. The current news headline is that we're lagging behind Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand in terms of science and technology innovation. Now the question is, in the context of narrative foresight, is that how might we be able to change the story? Can Philippines leapfrog, in STI? Or will we, copy what they're doing. And then, of course, by studying the invisible and the things that does not exist yet leads to insight. But then, of course, when you try to Google what insight is all about, it says that insight is the capacity or the ability to study from a future's perspective what does not exist yet. The capacity and an ability to have a deeper understanding of a situation or a thing. That is an insight. But future's insight is the capacity or the ability of understanding the things or a situation that does not exist yet. And as I've said, 2050 does not exist yet. And there's no such thing as a future data. From a future's purview, there's no such thing as a future data because simply the future does not exist yet. But we can anticipate possibilities and decide on the future that we all want to create, the preferred future today. Because us human beings have a natural capacity of foresight to predict. To a certain extent, we can predict, anticipate, imagine, and create things in a situation that does not exist yet, which leads us to the idea of anticipating emergence. Because emergence is something that's novel. Novelty is something that arises, that comes from nowhere. And futures, of course, is not about prediction. We've learned that a couple of years ago that futures thinking is not prediction. We can predict, yes, to a certain extent, perhaps trends for the next 3 years. But then again, as we move towards the future, it becomes more uncertain and complex. Now, think about 2050. Can you predict 2050? No one can predict the future, as Jim Dayer once said. And of course, in foresight, when you engage people in a conversation of foresight, through the futures thinking toolbox that includes ones among many scenarios, leads to the idea of what I call awakened insight. There is action learning in the process when an insight emerges in the conversation that we get. It's not just about the aha moment, but I'm going to tell you later what awakened insight means. But then again, when a new insight comes in, it enables you to change the conditions of change. While these are the mega trends, right? Like we do trend analysis and mega trend analysis, the future is not at the end of a trend line. You could actually gives you some sort of scaffolding in order for you to imagine the future, but it's not just about the data that you have right now. It's very essential. I'm not saying that we get away from it, but we should use data as a baseline for our story, as our scaffolding in the process of building foresight. Now, today in Europe, and of course supported by UNESCO, came the idea of what now they call the discipline of anticipation. For me, it sums up 3 different strands or schools of thought of futures thinking. Futures literacy. For UNESCO, as far as the group is concerned, futures literacy is a skill set to use the future to innovate today. It is a capacity and ability to employ the future as an asset, a tool, and a resource to innovate in the present. It is a skill set, the ability to anticipate, imagine things or situations that does not exist yet. That is futures literacy. Now, if you do not have the idea or the capacity or the skill set, to use the future, make sense of it, to change the conditions of change today and innovate something that's novel, then that person or organization is future illiterate. And going back to what Mark Twain had said, you cannot depend on your data when your imagination is out of focus. And then you also have these future studies, which emerge in the US, of course. It is this systematic study of possible, probable, and plausible futures, including now the worldviews and myths that underline each futures. Of course, each and every alternative future, preferred or integrated, has a story into it, and then underlying that story are the culture, the spiritual beliefs, the ideologies, the religious context, that informs, that drives, influences the way you perceive the future from the present. And strategic foresight is that when you apply it in an organizational context. This is the capacity of the organization to create and maintain a high quality, coherent, and functional forward view, and to use the insight arising in useful ways. And again, I would like to emphasize this, that now Foresight community of practice is moving from scenarios to building the ability and capability of people, persons, entities, and organizations to change the story. The capacity to use our imagination to anticipate and create something that does not exist yet. Because the tendency is that when we do not use imagination as our platform in scenario building, we might end up imagining the used and default future. If there's no imagination into the process, we might create a future merely amplifying what's happening in the present as if it is the future by 2050. It becomes what they call the used and default future, or the purchased future. Have you purchased your future from someone else? Are you creating the strategy of others? So, from a Philippine foresight perspective, that is the question I would like to pose to all of us. What's our niche? As scientists, as foresight practitioners, as a foresight community, what's our niche? When you say Filipino, this is the niche. It's niche in terms of science and technology innovation. And then, of course, this is the framework that I used when I facilitate my workshop. First, I do processes, tools that enables an organization to reveal what's obvious. First, let's have a conversation about what's obvious, the low-hanging fruit. Okay, well, now we know what the obvious things and stuff are. Then we ask ourselves, is this the future that we want? The default future, is it? If not, we ask the question, we reflect, and try to make sense of, okay, how can I reframe and design the future that I have perceived, assumed at this time? And that's where, methodologies and tools and processes that, deep dives into people's ways of knowing reality and epistemes. Of course, epistemology from an academic point of view is that, the meaning that we make out of it, the meaning of the context itself. And then, of course, I engage them into the process of reimagining the reframed future, which is I use creatives, games, and play. And then, once the alternatives and preferred future, I try to push them further, by asking them the question that if this is the preferred future that you want, how might you be able to transform it? So the process that I use is that I let people build prototypes, the proof of concept, because true engagement by building prototype, by using the hands, leads to a more deeper, more transformative insight. And then I've asked them to what might a person in the day of the life of a person be like in a 2050 scenario? Like the project that I had with UNICEF, imagining the future of children rights and HIV and AIDS in the Philippines by the year 2040 and 2050, several insights came out, and that gave them to think about, okay, perhaps now we need to rethink our strategies today. If this is the future that we want. And then, of course, this is the idea that always informs me in my future practice. And this is called the Dator's second law of the future. He said, any useful idea about future should appear to be ridiculous. And of course, when I dig deep, it's not really original to Dator Jim later, but then again, of course, a few years back, Albert Einstein said, if at first an idea does not sound absurd, then there is no hope for it. Now, I would like to show you this innovation video, which is an actual work of foresight. By using that idea of ridiculous ideas when you explore the future that leads to innovation. It's just a 2 minutes video. Can we play that?
Imagine the sound. Let us imagine the sound.
There's only one, you. So what if selecting you? But there is only one, you. So what if selecting your next vehicle focused on what truly matters? You. Introducing Genetic Select by Lexus, the world's first service that uses human genetics to match you with the car of your dreams. Through a partnership with 23andMe, using their proprietary DNA genotyping, one small saliva sample will unlock your DNA, telling us where you're from, where you're going, and now, how you're going to get there. Within 48 hours, your handcrafted Lexus will be delivered to your driveway. Based on your chromosomes, everything from the model, styling, and performance capabilities will be crafted exclusively for you. Inspired by your favorite scent, a genetically personalized new car smell. If your DNA markers reveal a susceptibility to freckling, protective UV tinting. Even an enhanced windshield matched to your personal prescription. Genetically predisposed to high caffeine consumption, enlarged cup holders. And best of all, operating your vehicle no longer requires a key. The perfect driving experience is in our DNA, because it's also in yours. Experience craftsmanship at the genetic level.
That is an actual work of foresight. When Lexus and some folks at the University of Hawaii tried to facilitate a workshop on the future vehicle, and then tried to look into the variables that could disrupt, create novelty in how we imagine the future cars, other than, of course, self-driving autonomous cars. And then, of course, here, Isaac Asimov, we all know him, we've read his books, and of course in the futures community, we read all of these things like science fiction. And then he said, the most exciting phrase in science, the one that heralds new discoveries, is not Eureka, I found it, but that's funny. So, now I just would like to, I'm not gonna play the game now, I'm just gonna show you one of the tools that I use when I facilitate innovation workshops from a foresight perspective. You can check this out. It was invented by a colleague at the University of Hawaii. His name is Dr. Stuart Henry. He developed a card game that enables people to actually quickly understand what scenario building is all about. So it's called the Thing from the Future game, right? So the idea, actually, the purpose of the Thing of the Future game, it is a methodology, a platform that helps people to imagine the future of a thing that does not exist yet. Like future, okay? When I say things that if I use the word does not exist yet, I refer to the future. So for example, let's try to imagine, what might this glass look like in the year 2100? Broken glass today, right? Yeah. How might this look like when you use that? How might it feel like when you use a glass by the year a century from now, right? In a scenario where there is collapse. Like for example, 100 years from now, the scenario is collapse. Now there's another pandemic by the year 2100, in a terrain of, let's just say, music. The glass where the terrain is the plot or the location where this glass exists. Okay, the scenario is collapse, a global pandemic scenario occurring by the year 2100 in the terrain of arts. Let's just say arts, not music, arts. That evokes the feeling of anger. When you use this glass, it evokes the feeling of anger. Now, try to imagine how might this glass look like in a future scenario where there is a collapse due to the global pandemic in the terrain of arts, that this glass evokes the feeling of anger. Yes, that's imagination. Now, this is the card. So, it's called Atom. Of course, it's a scenario builder. This card is a scenario builder. It uses Data's alternative futures archetype. Like, okay, there are 4 alternative futures in Data's archetype, like continued economic growth, collapse, transformation, and the discipline scenario. So those are the 4 alternative futures. Now, if you try to imagine what science and technology innovation could look like in this 4 alternative future scenario, you would have your scenarios, but of course with a timeline, like 2050 or 2100, right? But then of course there's a terrain where this glass, perhaps for science, technology, innovation is tested against. Like, for example, the terrain is climate change, right? That STI, of course, you try to incorporate also emotional intelligence into the process, not just analysis or logic, but also the emotional aspect of it, because things and stuff provokes emotions, they create emotion. So how might technology innovation look like in a transformation scenario, wherein perhaps we're in the space age a century from now, in the terrain of climate change? What would STI in those scenarios and terrain feel like? Right? So it gives you these variables to shift your thinking from the analytical to the imaginative. And now I remember Albert Einstein once said, imagination is the highest form of intelligence, right? It is the highest form of research. He has been saying that 50 years since the 1940s. Imagination is the highest form of research. That the sign of intelligence is not intellect, but imagination. So this is a good stuff. This is one of the best methodologies and tools. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago. So it's a scenario building exercise. So I always like, before I begin my scenario building process, my participants, I have to shift their mindset from the creative critical to the imaginative. But of course, strategic imagination, because we're trying to build a plan like the next 50 years or 30 years. So, like for example, and then of course there's another one which I used for governments. It is the city edition, but then again, the prompts is not. The prompt here is an arc, the terrain, the thing or the feature of an object, and the mood or the feeling that that object evokes. So, like for example, we can actually use this as a tool or methodology in imagining emergence or novelty. Right? Of course, as Dater once again said, technology, we create our tools, but then after our tools create us. Because tools and inventions provoke, mood, provokes emotion. Okay, so I just want to present to you the recent project that I had with the East-West Center Leadership Academy in partnership with the West Java Provincial Government, Journey of Foresight. This was a 4-month process. We were particularly really into the design of the workshop, like what language are we going to use, what's our approach, our methodology, for it to make sense, as far as the decision makers are concerned. So once, of course, here is the process wherein they created the scenarios. They already have the scenarios. There are different scenario tools and methodologies. One is a single driver, wherein you create the scenario using one variable. And then you also have the double matrix scenario process, wherein you try to use two variables to enable you to create the scenarios. But then again, of course, there are pros and cons to it. You simplify the scenario building process too much. That, of course, in the real world is really pretty complex, right? It does not work like that. But then again, of course, the easiest approach that helps people fast and easy, and effective and efficient is a scenario building archetype method. Of course, it was mentioned that Peter Schwartz is one. That's the classical, conventional approach to scenario building. And then you also have the alternative futures method. If you want to incorporate the outliers into your scenario building process, alternative futures work. But then again, of course, there's also hybrid type of a scenario process and work, which of course from Malaysian Foresight, they've been using hybrid approach to scenario workshop. And this is what we did for the West Java provincial government. West Java is like around 50 million in population, and their governor is an architect. So what we did is that when we designed the process is that, of course, this guy is an architect, might as well design a process that speaks his language, being an architect, because at the end of the day, it's the decision makers that decides on what to pursue or not. So we did this for two governance team. One is tourism. They wanted to look into the future of tourism in West Java by the year 2040, and another one is resilience. In fact, the idea, the concept of pandemic, actually came out during the scenario. And when they finalized, they agreed on their preferred future, they started building the prototype. And then, of course, once they build the prototype, they have to identify the implementing strategies, for them to be able to get into their preferred future. So I used inspect method, similar to steep and steeple, but inspect is the more hybrid one because it already incorporates culture and ethics and ideas into the scenario build, into the drivers. But what I did was to flip this in order to enable the participants to identify the implementing strategies at different levels. And then, of course, once they identify the implementing strategies, we backcasted using backcasting methodology for it to make sense in terms of planning. And then this was an intensive one. It was like for almost 2 weeks. It's a 2 weeks process. And then once they finalized their prototypes and the implementing strategies, they presented that to the West Java provincial government legislative body. So they invited folks and stakeholders, including the ministers of West Java, and the participants presented the implementing the scenario, the prototype, and the implementing strategies. They were going to fund this project. And after that, of course, this is one of the photos wherein they presented their ideas and scenarios and prototypes and strategies. And the last day was a presentation with the governor at the governor's palace. So since the governor was an architect, so we've encouraged him to build prototypes, a proof of concept of their model scenarios and narratives. And after that, he gave his commitment, and this is what emerged during the event, which we now call Impact Foresight. West Java government's roadmap to 2040. To provide training, he said after that was like to provide training to 6,500 civil servants in West Java and futures literacy. And of course, when you do futures and foresight, you don't close the future, but rather you open possibilities. So when you create the roadmap, it doesn't mean that you have closed the future and then, of course, from an epistemological point of view, the spiritual for them is also essential because they're Islamic. It was a part of the conversation, actually. The spiritual was a part of the conversation in the scenario building process. And then of course, it must be personal too. You know, we try to, at the end of the day, make the future intimate. You know, if this is the preferred future that you want, you have to ask yourself, is this aligned with your personal goals? It must be aligned to your personal goals. You know, it has to blend. The personal must be able to blend with the systemic or the systems. And of course, other than that is of course the publication. They need to create a brand of their foresight narrative and historify the future preferred. Because when you start, you know, communicating the future and foresight to the public, you know, they wouldn't be able to understand if you're presenting data, right? So you have to generate some sort of a story that connects with them. You know, you storify the data in this process. And then he said that action year will be 2020. So that's what he did. And then of course, the same process is what we did with the United Nations for Climate Change when they tried to anticipate novelty in the context of a climate change world. It's no longer climate change, but a climate change world by the year 2040, wherein you've got 1.5 or higher, you know, in 2050. So what kind of innovation, you know, would you be able to create, you know, to enhance our resilient and adaptive capacity to survive, you know, and transform even in those kinds of scenarios. In the same manner with UNICEF, and just recently facilitated a workshop with the Asian Development Bank on education sector strategy by the year 2050, and one of their scenarios that they said that ADB wouldn't exist in those years. Yeah, that's one of the possibility, and another one was like, you know, new unicorn projects and education will emerge. Because, you know, the new loan grants, you know, it's 15 years pala yun. Yung mga grants nila, 10 to 15 years. It's kind of pretty long term. So, you know, they started asking these questions. And then, of course, here, we facilitated a workshop at the Asia Pacific Futures Network with futurists, because now we're trying to question the tools and methodologies that we're using currently and try to create some novel stuff. You know, it continues to evolve. And now, just for your information, the U.S. Embassy of Manila and the East-West Center Leadership Academy have organized and funded, you know, the first Philippine Foresight Workshop Series on the future of U.S.-Philippines partnership in the areas of environmental management, in the areas of citizen engagement. Yes, yeah, they're pretty concerned about that, and that they want to see the possibilities in the area of environmental management, the area of citizen engagement, human security. You know, but then again, the focus really, these people are strategic. The focus are the communications professionals, right? Those who have an indirect or direct involvement in journalism or into the context of fake news. So if you are with NAST and your work is related to communications, please do apply. Okay, one will be in Manila and another one will be in Davao. So in President Duterte's province, so city. So you know, kindly apply. You know, it's funded. It's a fellowship and scholarship offered by the East-West Center Leadership Academy. Yep. And then, of course, now I think that's my piece. And again, you know, just to conclude this, you know, again, just to conclude this, you know, futures and foresight, again, I want to repeat, is a learning journey, right? And which makes it really interesting and exciting. You know, if we consider the process as a learning journey, that we could all be together and share our intelligence via collective intelligence. And then, of course, what I felt as a facilitator of futures and foresight in the last 10 years is that the process is really transformative. At the end of the day, you will be able to have a scenario plan, you know, you'll be able to conceive some outliers or business as usual in the context of continued economic growth. But then again, at the end of the day, as a participant of futures work, this is a learning journey because it enriches meaning of people and it enables people, make them realize that you can actually create the future that you want. Again, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very privileged and honored to be a part of this journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cruz. There is a slight change in the program. After the two speakers, we're going to have 10 minutes open forum, and the floor is now open for the question for Mr. Cruz and National Scientist Lourdes. Is the
To the first two speakers. And it's a very cynical question, but when I ask it, I'm really in search of a satisfying answer. First question I have is, why should I bother about building a very good future 30 years from now? I'm about to consume my allotted lifespan, and it does not matter to me what happens in the future. If you say the traditional answer is, I want to do this for my descendants, after my grandson, I'm no longer connected to the next generation, even genetically. So the question is, if there is no good answer that I'm satisfied, I'm going to walk out of here and go to the mall and enjoy maybe a Chinese dinner rather than stay the whole day. So why are we doing this? What is the single most important reason why you should spend 2 days doing this? For whom and what for?
Anybody? Dr. Cruz, National Scientist Cruz, Mr. Cruz. Sir.
I remember one workshop we had with Think City in Penang, Malaysia. You know? This involved the cabinet ministers. And the last session was about intimate futures, right? Making the future personal. So the process was meditative and reflective. And it took them 5 minutes to undergo such process. It was meditative and reflective. Are my visions of the future aligned with my personal goals in the present? And then, since this was personal, it was optional for the participants, you know, the ministers, to share their reflections. You know, and then the minister of the local government shared his reflection, you know, during that session, the intimate future session. And then he said, you know, Sherman, I realized that I'm about to retire, right? And I've done all that I could give in the last 30 years of my experience in my life, you know, in building a better future for Malaysia, you know, in the local government. And then, as I reflected on it, you know, I see faces of people in my mind. And then I realized that I have young people in my team, you know. And then he said that I've done all that I could give. Now is the time, I realized, for me to pass it, you know, to my colleagues, right? To the younger generation, you know. Then what I'm gonna do on Monday morning is that I'm gonna call for a meeting, a committee meeting. And then we'll set up what we can do for the next 3 years. And then a week after that, I'm gonna retire. You know, that was his reflection. And then in the context of futures, I've said it must be intimate. But then again, the assumptions that we make as far as our engagements are concerned is a personal thing. So if some of us think that in that way, like how the cabinet minister realized that he had done all of what he can give and he could no longer give, and it's that the idea that he's going to set something up to enable people, his younger predecessors, you know, to enable capacity them to do things that they need to do, you know, at the earliest time, you know, to, you know, create the change that they have envisioned. He could no longer become a part of that. So that might not be a satisfying answer, but based on the workshop that we did, that's what the cabinet minister did. And right 2 weeks after that, he resigned. But before he left, he created a program, a team, a committee within the local government in Foresight. Which, of course, in terms of continuity, the narrative that he pitched into the workshop process is a part of that. But in terms of execution, the implementation is no longer part of it. But the meaning, the context that he brought into the process is a part of the next steps.
And so, I'm retired, 77 years old. But siguro sabi ng mga bata, bakit nakikialam pa ito? But last year we started advocating sustainability and resilience through the Future Earth program. Well, it's because, we've lived here for all our life. I mean, we love the earth, we love the people, and we don't want to see the earth just being destroyed. So parang, ang hirap bitawan, di ba? Yung ganon. I mean, it's we want to see that the future generations will live well. Ganon. Well,
Just to clarify, I'm nothing against if I were to do anything, I will tackle the current problem at hand and look at it as more important than my envisioning of the future. I'm not abandoning that. For example, I will feel much better if I'm now out there trying to solve the plastic problem and working with groups that solve the plastic problem. In my area in health, I would be out there to do something about immediate problems in health. Without saying that I don't care about the future, I'm just putting it in perspective. So, and also I think every human person that comes to the earth is partly responsible for his destiny. So I do not want to assume the destiny of those who are yet to be born. That's their problem, they should solve it. I will give them a framework on which to do, but my framework may not be relevant to them. Who knows what will happen tomorrow or the next day. So that's always, I express that because I'm always having these misgivings about doing so much of this rather than focusing on what is in front of you. Somebody can solve the traffic problem overnight. That is a tremendous improvement of the human condition. So, yeah, I will stay.
Dr. Rasco? Dr. Rasco? And then after Dr. Rasco, sister.
Yeah, I like the statement about data and imagination. You see, data bores me and I'd rather use my imagination. You said that in the future, imagination is going to be more valuable than data, and imagination is a tool for making foresight. Now my problem is that suppose we can make computers that can imagine. Will that not replace us completely? Kasi ngayon, data is already monopolized by computers. Eh, pati ba naman imagination? Yeah. So tapos na yung problema natin. Sila na lang, yung computer na lang gagawa ng foresight.
May we request people to please state your name and your institutional affiliation when you speak during the open forum so that we can record it. Thank you, sir.
Yes, my name is Doy Romero. I'm now with the Ateneo Development Studies Program, but I taught at UP for more than 30 years. And I used to also be with the Development Academy of the Philippines. I think the question of National Scientist Domingo is true of all of us. The problem is you're already captive. That you are a national scientist means that you have taken a collective journey. You're not like a farmer who is out there just trying to get his food from his labor. You have dedicated your life, and that is an investment. And now you look at your sense of justice. Plato said justice is being what you can be. Now you have developed your capabilities to this point, being a national scientist, because I think you wanted to contribute something, and that's true for all of us. Now, if at this point, when you are at the pinnacle of your capacity to contribute insights and imagination to the people, and you say, I'm not involved, you're doing injustice to yourself, right? So I think we are captive here. I mean, it's too late for us to cop out of this particular endeavor. I mean, it's all ingrained in our minds, right? The other thing is current problems in our work with informal settler communities, because that's what we've been doing. We've been working with informal settler communities, 30 to 40, Pandibulacan, and we realized when we did a futures mapping with them, that is what unlocks the possibilities for them to think of solutions to current problems. For instance, they say, bakit ako titira dyan sa Manggahan Village, which is a high-rise? Hindi naman sila magbibigay ng titulo. Anong ipapamana ko doon sa anak ko? And ganun yung discussion. But when we went through a scenario building process with them, sabi natin, oh, in 25 years, nasa na kayo? Uy, nag-graduate na yung mga anak ko. Paano sila nag-graduate? Kasi malapit kami sa may eskwela, dito lang kami. By that time, kaya saan na kayo nakatira? Ay, siyempre, pinauwi na ako ng anak ko, binigyan na akong bahay sa probinsya. So, then sabi na, bakit mo kailangan ng titulo dito sa bahay mo? Then they realize, oh nga, ano? So, sabi nila, oh, sige, para mapag-aral ko yung anak ko, I will stay here in Manggahan so that they can bring me back to the province later. So, what I'm really saying is that sometimes, and we are doing this, by the way, in E. Rodriguez now, di ba? When you give them an imagination of a preferred future, it unlocks the possibilities for them. Especially if they are participant in that process. Ang problema kasi, we manufacture the future and we give it to them. Ayun, hindi nila na-imagine. But I think, sir, rhetorical yung question nyo, I don't think you will come out.
There was a keyword that I heard from sir, no? Yung word na pamana.
Legacy. Yeah, I think in that context we could frame, our engagement. The purpose, the importance of our engagement is in the context of legacy. Pwede, in that context. And then, of course, as you said, sir, hope could be a form of rebellion in this era, because like there are a lot of uncertainty and things that are going on. That's beyond our comprehension, and everything's novel right now, like the corona. That is something novel, and of course, perhaps if you try to do a research on pessimism, baka mataas masyado yung pessimism and perspective, kasi if you're pessimistic, that's, it burns a different way of knowing the future. And of course, in that case, in today's world, hope could be a form of rebellion. Yeah.
So, ang foresight po, pamana. And hope will lead us there. So, anybody who still need to ask or share their ideas, wala po. Sa totoo lang po, ang iniisip ko kanina, karamihan po sa mga tao dito, mga institution builders. Kasi like si Dr. Domingo, dun sa kanyang mga ginawa na, oo, in terms of research and even sa universal healthcare, si Dr. Javier, sabi ko nga mga institution builders na ang mga naan dito, which is, tapos may mga young scientists tayo dito, may mga, I think some media practitioners also here. I think pwede nating magawa yung gusto nating magawa ngayon. Tsaka, meron po ditong mga tao din na magaling mangarap. Now to deliver a lecture on scenario building, let us have Professor magbe-break daw po muna, pasensya, nalimutan ko. So may 5 minutes break po. Kanina na-serve na yung ating AM snacks. But meron po tayong gusto nyong magpunta sa CR, makipag chika-chika.
building is part of technology foresight. It is one of the tools. It is just one of the many tools combined, but we will be focusing ourselves on scenario building, emanating from the concept of technology foresight. This is how it goes. Okay, take a look at this. And there you go. See? As you can see, what is it? Foresight involves the systematic attempt to look into the longer-term future of science. National scientists, what's the future of science in the Philippines 30 years from now? Technology. Where are our technologies heading? The economy, you need money to do science and technology. Will the economy of the Philippines be viable enough to sustain the 30 years foresight? The environment and society, basically, some pure technology might have impact on the environment or even humanity. Eventually, if you look at all this point of view, is that you are now going to identify emerging generic technologies and underpinning areas of strategic research likely to yield the greatest economic, environmental, and social benefits. What's the whole point of this? As of now, you have done already research. Okay? So, how long will this research last? Meaning, what are the outputs of this research is only up to how many years? Now, you're talking about 30 years. Meaning that, as the previous person, Sherman, said, that it is not yet invented. They are not yet there. The research that will be laid down 30 years are still not existing. You might have an idea already, but they will not be in fusion if you will not really lay down a plan for that. The research that we have been reaping rewards in terms of our country is actually what we have right now. Okay? So what are the research outputs that we are actually reaping the rewards here in the Philippines? As of now, we have the dengue. Oh, that's it. It's already patented. Dengue detection kit. Okay. What else? What else technology do we have? We have the rice technology. Okay. We have the AGT. Okay, the monorail. Okay, and then of course we are ready into space. So we're moving into space. Basically, we have such satellites. As of now, we have an array of technology, basically, which emanated from research. This is what we have right now in terms of our status. We have the seeds that Dr. Raskas already, modified or more or less, produced 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and we're using it. So this is the landscape now of the Philippines. What we have right now is, this is where we are. But how about 30 years? Are these products, what we have been creating, still going to be relevant in the next 30 years? That is the question, actually. Because of the changing situation, and in such a way that you are going to, again, the question is, are you ready for imagination? Okay, R&D is actually, again, imagination. An imagination with a twist, because you're dealing with the present data, but how about the 30-year data? They are not yet there. Okay, and this is actually the whole idea that it is actually finding a needle in the haystack. Or something like that. What is the sweet spot for STI? Science, technology, and innovation. Where are we going to place our bets, our people, our scientists, our structures, our resources, laboratories for the next 30 years? That is the question. Okay? Okay, of course, that is from the APEC Center for Technology Foresight. Moving on. So what are the implications? See, as you can see, foresight is actually what? Systematic attempt to look to the future. We are now 2020. 30 years is systematic. We have to look into the future. If we don't look into the future, someone might be looking into the future of SDI in the Philippines. Maybe Malaysia is looking at us right now. Maybe Indonesia. Okay? If we don't have such document in the next 30 years, they will be what? Open. Our scientific community will be open to them, meaning that they might find a sweet spot in terms of research and development that our country needs. And eventually, they'll be the ones reaping the rewards. Okay? So again, that is actually strategic in a sense. Second term, there is long term. Typically, 10 years, and take note of the word there, possibly 25 to 30 years. So swak tayo doon. Foresight, scenario building can be done at that point. No? It is a process rather than set of techniques. And as of now, everyone is represented here. Research producers, okay, the top guns of the Philippine national science and technology, research users, you know where your research are, where they're going. Policymakers, of course, we are now, we have just signed the Innovation Act. Okay, so that is actually a welcome for us that S&T is actually already moving into the, not really the political arena, but the decision-making arena for the country. And eventually, the community. The product of this foresight, the whole exercise from today till tomorrow, is going to be what? It will not stay as a paper. It will be presented. Okay, so as national scientists, academician, a lot of things is expected from us, from you. Okay, and this is actually what the Philippines is waiting for. This, from my point of view, is a very historic moment to come up with a national foresight for 8 teams for the country. Okay. Okay, next one. Implications again. Well, you can read through, but the whole point there is that what I'm trying to say about foresight is that the first bullet there, emerging technology, exploitation, the benefits, and take note of the third one, technologies in their pre-competitive state, meaning that are we ready to compete with some technologies that we have not yet handled? Selective funding to ensure rapid development. Where will we put our money in terms of, let's say, transforming science, technology, innovation into the commercial application? And actually strategic in a sense, where are we going to put our budget for strategic research? What do you mean by strategy? Meaning it's not short-term, it's long-term. And the objectives of the country must be fulfilled based on certain programs, objectives of our country. And of course, the solution to current or future practical problems, we can also look into the social, new technological benefits, and these benefits. Take note, it is not just impact on industry and the economy. The whole point is that science, technology, innovation, at this day and age, you must have what? The social dimension. Who's going to benefit from this? Okay? The more that we can say that this foresight will benefit, you know, the classes from class D, C, B, and A, or even the E class, is very important. This endeavor is actually, could be addressing those situations there. Okay, this is just a way for you to say that what is the difference between foresight and forecast? Foresight, this is it, recognition of uncertainties. 30 years is risky. Adaptive understanding, why are we going to be engaged in that technology or innovation, and it's qualitative. We cannot, numbers are great, data are great, but the whole point is transform those data into something descriptive. Okay, because once data is just like numbers, you know, who would understand that? Okay, remember you have different strata, A, B, C, and D. Even the A class would not appreciate numbers. They would appreciate trends. They would appreciate characteristics, quality. Okay, yes. Because that is actually how you communicate science, technology, and innovation. We cannot say, okay, we're looking at around the summation of X, Y, and Z resulting to a negative influx of this energy would result into this kind of what? Application. Can the ordinary Filipino understand that? You see? He understands what? This technology will be able to what? Lessen my expenses. This technology will be able to what? Make me feel good. This technology will be able to increase my crop yield. This technology will be able to make our work in the university or in this factory efficient. This technology can replace this import. It could be a substitute. See, those are the things that, you know, how science emanates and be appreciated by the different classes of society. Okay? Okay, how about forecasts? This is much more certainties. Okay? Kung this is more of the predictive type, it disguises uncertainties. Once you're predicting, you are not actually what? Saying the uncertainties. No? It's a prediction. And eventually, sometimes the risks are concealed. Eventually, it's a single point projection from point A to point B, moving into more quantitative. Okay? So this one, the forecast, we can extract a lot of forecasts, but take note the forecast must be fed into the foresight. And this is actually where you are standing now. Scenario building is actually a foresight exercise because you're looking at the long term, the future. What you're dealing with is actually qualitative data already transformed. Okay, the key elements: structured anticipation, interactive and participative methods. We have 8 teams here. Who knows? These teams might be what? Intersecting. One team can benefit another team. 3 teams could be actually combined into one. It depends now on how we process the whole spectrum of what we have already gathered in the previous weeks about your STIs. New networks can be formed here. Definitely the visioning. Okay? Vision cannot just be what? Something that I vision for the next 30 years, something will happen like this. No. Once you put the word strategic, the whole point is that the vision is laid down on a mission, an objective, and a goal. And that is actually, the visioning becomes much more what? A parameter based, meaning that something is expected out of this visioning. Let's say, for example, a qualitative situation that poverty could be reduced, scientists could be increased, education level could be what? Increased also, competitiveness could be also increased. So see, all this situation can be now connected. And basically, this is all about present-day decisions and actions. The foresight, the scenario building that you'll be doing today is actually what? This will be a historic document. We are lucky to be conducting this because 30 years is actually what? This is what we know is a pamana. Impapamana mo to sa next generation. That laying this is actually a very important legacy. Okay? Because if you don't have any pamana for the next generation of scientists, okay, that is going to be a dilemma. You have a foresight dilemma, meaning that you will just be what? You will just be reactive to what's happening in society, in technology, in natural disasters, etc. Okay? It's going to be more or less a little bit chaotic in a sense. No? Yeah. Okay, and then of course, there could be some social benefits in these benefits in such a way that foresight or scenario building can reduce these benefits. So this is actually why we are being engaged in this exercise. Okay? You might not be, you just don't focus on new networks. You focus on everything. Things will be coming here as you go into the process. Okay, the 6 conditions of a foresight. Communication. You are now communicating as a scientist. You will be communicating this to your different constituents, to the national government, to the people, the Philippines. We can bring people together. Concentration. 2 days. What can we do in 2 days? But take note, you are here in this room. Something might come out with the different teams. But take note that concentration can lead for another round of what? Analysis about this scenario building that you have created. Eventually, it should be longer term. This is just the tip of the iceberg that we're doing. Remember that what you're doing is for long-term vision. And of course, here you go, R&D partnerships. 8 teams, you might see here that some of the teams might interact. We could have energy and water for ICT combination. There could be what? A health and ICT combination. There could be food and nutrition and ICT combination. It depends now. You see, some of these factors will be coming out. And coordination. You as national scientists is actually what? This is the added burden on scientists because you will be coordinating with a lot of scientists. The usual scientist is what? They're in the lab, right? But you are going to set out the trend that scientists need not be in the lab. Scientists need to coordinate and collaborate. Okay, this is actually some of the scenarios you will be coming out like this. Eventually, consensus building must be created to have a clear picture of the future, and eventually commitment. So, Ma'am Rod, whatever what we produce here, this is a national commitment. Okay, 30 years national commitment set for iterations. Okay, and this is 30 years for the Philippine STI. Okay, I'm already 53 next week. So 30 years, Ma'am Rod? Yes? Well, knock on wood. Okay. So, my son, my apo, etc. will be the legacy to see this work that we are doing, that you are doing, that we as scientific, social, technological, and economic expertise or experts in this country are doing. Okay? So this is going to be this documents will be part of our a legacy. Not only our legacy, but this will be part of our commitment to the country. Okay? Moving on. Okay, and then of course implementation. Ito yung problema. Be ready for a lot of support and collaboration in terms of finances, networks, structures, okay, infrastructure even. Who knows? One of the teams here might be what? We might build a new infrastructure for the country. Okay, it will come up in the situation. It might be like that. No? It might be an infrastructure. It might be producing the next 1,000 scientists again. Okay. So this is actually the challenge that might arise from this. And eventually comprehension. Comprehension meaning that as scientists, the holistic way of understanding each and every theme here is very important. And 30 years, we hope that the Philippines will be changing at a global level. So kaya ba? Well, we have just sent 2 satellites upstairs. Diba, may 2 tayong Diwata at saka ng isa? Diwata 1, Diwata 2. Okay? So, ang susunod sino? Aswang. This is a joke. Aswang 1 or something like that. Or Tikbalang, whatever. So, okay? Kung may Diwata, syempre may Aswang or something like that. Just a joke for you to wake up. Okay, this is actually the balanced perspective. This is just a diagram to tell you that as scientists, we're pushing science. Okay? But take note that there are priorities in this world. Okay? You have broader community. The sciences are the R&D and strengths of the country, and resources are there, and there could be technological opportunities. What I mean about this is that you must be balancing the 2 situations. Okay, of course you can put some more there in the diagram there, no? But the whole point there is that science and technology push must be actually linked to the demand pool also. Okay, and this is actually one of the riddles, one of the situations that you will be unraveling as we go further. Okay, and there you go. The last bullet there is commercial opportunities. And this is where you see S and T becomes now what? A part as a factor for our GDP growth, or economic growth. Okay? Okay, so if you look at technology foresight, we are going to use scenario planning or scenario building. Actually, this is what you call scenario building because scenario planning is a different situation. The scenarios are already there and you are planning to create those scenarios. Here, you're going to build the scenarios, meaning that you will be starting from, not really zero, but a green field. Okay, it's a greenfield situation. 30 years after, from your expertise, what could be the scenarios? See, this is actually what Foresight is. You can do a lot of this, but we are concentrating on scenario building. So if you look at that, the whole point there is that you can combine actually, and actually you have done already Delphi, some environmental scan, eventually at the end of the day, you might see a lot of future going on. So we are actually what? We are poised with a lot of techniques and methods in order to understand the future of the Philippines. Okay? Okay, years. You're doing strat plan, 1 to 2 years. That's a given every year. You go out once in a while. Wala ng Boracay, sarado muna ngayon or something. You can go to Laguna or Los Baños. 1 to 2 years, basically, the operations. 2 to 5 years, trend analysis, expert opinion, eventually technology road mapping. But as you can see, Delphi pooling can be 3 to 10 years. In practice, scenario planning is there, building. We call it scenario building plus scenario planning, 5 to 50 years. See, that's how useful this technique is. Okay, some postscripts for you. Life can only be understood backwards but must be lived forward. So what do you mean by this? Move on. Diba? What happened to the Philippines? Accept it. That's a past, but we have to move on. Okay? Next one. Scenario planning enables us to use the power of hindsight by transporting us to the plausible futures. Okay? By Ron Johnston's of Apex Technology Foresight. You're now here. You're imagining, okay, this is 2020. So 2050, how do you get from here to there? The magic word there is what? Sherman? Imagination. That's a magic word actually. See? That's the tool. That is actually the essence of imagination. Next one. Scenarios are not about predicting the future. We cannot predict. As scientists, we have been trained as predicting because it's all about experimental. But this time, you're dealing with what? You're dealing with not experimental system. You're dealing here with complex systems. Society, politics, technology, science, economics. So what's the whole point there? Scenarios are not about predicting the future. Rather, they are about perceiving the future in the present. Okay? And this is actually by this Schwartz, The Art of Long View. No? So, with the imagination mindset, kanina, with all this mindset already, you're going to be what? You're going to be imagination-driven experts. Okay? You have to loosen up. You really have to loosen up. You are experts, but take note that you must be what? You're ready to absorb, reabsorb, and snowball along the scenario building process. Kasi, pag masyado kang conservative, what will happen to a scenario building process? Marami kang itatago. You have to open up, basically, your expertise, your field, your industry, what you know of as of now, because we are going to set forth towards the future. 30 years. Okay? So, this is why we have to leap forward. But take note, what we have done already is that we have come up with some trends already based on the previous, I've said already some documents. And these are again some of the ways why you are doing scenario building. Right brain creative, social interactive process, stakeholder involvement, tacit and emerge from a process. Meaning that what you will be creating is not just what an imagination. It's a process towards an imagination. And moving on, why scenarios? There you go. What's a word there? Alternative futures. Okay? What's an alternative? You have alternative 1, 2, 3, and 4. See? So for example, what happened, for example, right now with EndGo? Do we have an alternative future for that? Meron. What? Well, you have to open up what? The Clark. Di ba? So that's a sports. Supposed to be that's a sports community. That is now going to be what? Tainted with what? Yes. You never thought that that was actually going to be a sports arena. Now it's going to be tainted, something like that. Will that do good for the country? That's a little bit scary, you know. A symbolic institution becoming, okay, that's a little bit, yes, very different. Next one, allow for qualitative perspectives, meaning that how do you want the future to be? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it excellent, etc.? Okay, and eventually allows for sharp discontinuities. 30 years, you might see some R&D, maybe cut off funding because at the end of the day, some of the R&D is actually what? Not doing great at all. No? So you might, you know, go into alternative funding for research and development. A tool for ordering perceptions about alternative future environments. And eventually, forms of stories expressing multiple perspectives of complex events. No? Just like Karina, it's all about storytelling. Telling stories, not now, but how to get the stories from now to the future. Okay? So measures of the good scenario, this is actually assumptions. You can question the assumptions. Some insights can be developed. You measure the problem. You share the understanding. This is very important. Rehearsing responses. What do you mean by this? Let's say, for example, you develop around 2 to 3 scenarios. Let's put an uncertainty there in one of the scenarios. A wildcard scenario. Okay, so you pit around 3 to 4 variables. You put an uncertainty that will have a big negative impact on the scenario. What can you do with that kind of scenario? You can iterate it. You can rehearse. If this happens, this is actually one of the process we can mitigate the impact of this uncertainty. Rehearsal, you know, di ba? If you're, I was a fan of, karaoke. And one, so now when you sing in a karaoke lounge, what? You'll be, someone will clap at you, someone will just say, oh, take up that mic, it doesn't, So nowadays, the karaoke machine is very important as a household equipment because you are now rehearsing. See, you just don't sing in a typical party without really having that kind of practice. See, so that's the whole point of scenario building. It gives you a practice to rehearse your alternatives or your response to that kind of alternative scenario. And eventually, developing robust strategies effective if circumstances change. So some robust strategies can be mixed around. Okay, then on, strengths. This is one of the strengths. Okay, another strength. And this one here. Take a look at the last portion there. Challenge existing strategy and policy thinking. Tell me a policy that is actually hounding the science community. Procurement. See? This process can actually derail that or more or less change that policy. Another policy that hounds scientists or the technological community. Cash basis. Okay, you have so much money, you don't know how many days. 15 days you have to dispose of the money every day. See? How about the brain drain issue? Yeah. Okay. How about the reverse brain drain? Brain drain. See? How about the internal brain drain? Meaning that Filipino scientists inside the country will not work for a Filipino company. Instead, they'll be working for a multinational company. See? 4 to 5 years of engineering, you graduate around, let's say, 100 engineers in your prestigious school. 50% of them will go into a multinational company. The other 50%, call center. The other 50% goes abroad. How many engineers are left to create innovations? Yeah. Are you sure that they will come back? See, this is actually a hounding problem for us. Okay, and then of course, strengths. Okay, this is all about decision making. Ito, deliberately present distinctly different possible futures. Who drinks milk tea here? Okay, milk tea. Okay, so how many milk tea is operating now in the country? How many brands of milk tea? Huh? Almost 20. And then every day a new company arises to become a new milk tea. There was this company of a new milk tea, Tipsy Tea. Yeah, Tipsy Tea. So what do you buy that milk tea? They put a little liquor on that. Okay. Tipsy tea, yes. So definitely you drink tea with a little bit of liquor in that, and it's doing great. Take a look at that. Deliberately present distinctly different possible futures. See, a Filipino just derailed the future of milk tea by having it with a little bit of spirits. And it's allowed? Yes, because how many percent alcohol is allowed? Yeah? Just 3%. So you just calculate the percentage based on the ml, and eventually that's it. You know, a drop or two will make you tipsy, but will not make you what? Lashing. Okay, you're drunk. No? So see, the alternative could be happening like that. Next one. Take a look at this point here. It is better to get the future imprecisely right than it is to get the future precisely wrong. Tell me industries which we got precisely wrong.
The palm oil industry of Malaysia. Changing it already.
Okay. The rubber industry in the Philippines, di ba? We thought the rubber was too hectic for us, it's too much of a job. What happened? We did not protect our genome, and the rubber was moving from the Philippines, going to Malaysia, Indonesia, and who are now the rubber giants? Malaysia and Indonesia. We got the future of rubber precisely wrong. See? Whereas your cars, the tires there are made from tires coming from Malaysia or Indonesia. Some are even from China. You know, they buy rubber, send it to China, and process it there. Okay. So, what's the data for rubber production? Are we competing? No. Okay, tires specifically. Okay, pitfalls depending on the forecast based on extrapolation from past. Okay, what do you mean by this? Extrapolation. Scientists, engineers, etc. Sometimes, they apply extrapolation. So what happened in the past, let's just extrapolate, the behavior will be like this. Diba? What happened to your coffee industry? Nasira ng taas, see? So, yun, talagang wild card yun, malabo yun. Is there another coffee basin now, or more or less a field that we can plant coffee? Mindanao, could be somewhere in Negros or something like that, see? Baguio is responding actually. They have one of the best Arabica, see? But what is the demand for that? It's big. Do we have enough coffee scientists in this country?
Coffee drinkers.
Coffee drinkers. So yun. Wala tayong coffee scientists who more or less take care of the genome, the gene pool, etc. Make sure that we have enough, genes, germplasm, things like that. Okay? So, as we go along these bullets, you see now science, technology, innovation is what? We have a long way to go. Okay, and that's why foresight is very important. Scenario building is very important. Okay, next one. Weak points with scenario planning. 2 days to. Take a look at that. Okay, we're doing 2 days for you to see scenario planning or scenario building. 12 to 18 months during the past years. But with the internet around, compression time is around 6 months. We can do it, or more or less. But 2 days, it's going to be a challenge. We are just, looking at the tip of the iceberg. Okay, the base, the data that you collect. Okay, corporate scenarios cannot be published for reasons of confidentiality. Ma'am, this is a national foresight. Will this be open to our ASEAN neighbors? Okay. Okay, so
Not yet. We have to
later on, no? So just imagine why foresight and scenario building is actually, that is a tenet. It is actually intelligence gathering. Okay, so and this is actually sometimes we are too open. We transform the foresight into something that they can see, and that's actually where sometimes you are, yes, vulnerable to copycats or something like that. Okay, so yes, okay. Okay, second to last bullet, only a few scenarios can be fully developed and remembered. What do you mean by this? Just like Sherman Karina, the branding, the catchy title should be there. Scientist is trying to become what? As scientists, you are technical, right? We are trained to become technical. You see that increase in temperature is always by degrees centigrade, degrees Kelvin, etc. We have to be specific with what our technical terms. But in scenario building, because you will be delivering this to different stakeholders, you must be transforming the technical into something catchy. Okay. What's a catchy title for? Scenarios are meant to be remembered by the stakeholders. A mental model exists in every one of us as scientists, stakeholders. That becomes now a battle cry. See? What do you mean by that? People are going to remember that we are moving into this direction. Vietnam has just released their first car last year. Viet Fast. Take a look at the brand. Viet Fast. Yes, fast. Viet Fast. What a name. Viet Fast. See? Emanating from their industry situation, eventually transforming it into a brand. Buying a Viet Fast? Okay, it's from Vietnam? Well, Vietnam, but take of the word fast. It's fast, meaning that it can run. And see how you can now remember such brands. Okay, branding. So again, as scientists, you'll be trained later on to come up with catchy titles with your scenarios of the different teams. Okay. Okay, and of course, scenario building is not all about the last bullet there. We are fond of, okay, what's the best case? What's the worst case? What's the most likely continue? If you present it like this, investors or stakeholders will always what? There's a worst case scenario. So if you are presented with a worst case scenario, what will you feel? Yes. Or most likely continue as business as usual. Oh, there's nothing new here. Best case, are you sure that's the best? Show me, di ba? Why is that the best? And since this is the challenge for scenario building, scenario building is actually, with a catchy title, tells you that a scenario can be what narrative in a sense that how would you react if this will be the situation? Meaning that the mental model could be not really a best case, but a plausible case. Meaning that science, technology, innovations can be integrated together in such a way that you are solving a problem or presenting a solution as years go by, meaning that there is what resolution for this. Okay? So at the end of the day, people will be what? Looking at that from, okay, constructive. Meaning that, we are seeing now where science, technology, innovation is emanating now. Okay, and then the steps in scenario planning is 10 stage. Stage 1, focal issue identification, time frame, and of course, you are all the participants here. I've sent already stage 1 there for the workshop. Stage 2, environmental analysis, which is actually extracting a lot of informations and trends. You know, stage 3, this is very interesting. This is the identification and characterizing key predictable variables. What do you mean by the key predictable variables? See, key variables, factors that can have an impact on your focal issue. Okay? And of course, you are also having the critical uncertainties. It's just like the wild card. You'll be asking yourself, what if I have known that situation? Okay, so this you are testing now. You want to get uncertainties. Okay, things that you might not seem to know in the next 30 years that can happen. You don't have an idea that it will happen. Okay, but you're putting it on the table as an uncertainty. And of course, stage 5 is clustering the variables, meaning that you're managing it, ranking the variables for establishing the key driving forces, meaning that what drives this variable to be predictive? How will you say that this variable will actually move the scenario? Stage 7 is the logic behind that. How do you put the variables in a graph, in a sense that you will be looking at how they interact? Stage 8, this is the narrative that you'll be creating later on. And stage 9 is assessment. Very exciting because you are going to critique your scenarios. And eventually, stage 10 is the implications. Okay? The implication you'll be extracting. What's the implication for SEI, for budget, R&D, etc.? So, see, this is a complete menu actually of scenario building. 6 months, but we are going to tackle this in just 2 days. For the tip of the iceberg, if we can create just one scenario out of this activity per team, well and good, because the next run, you can now relate it to more scenarios later on. So you will be trained to, based on these 10 stages. Okay? So, the origins, these guys have it all. Countries have been doing it already. And of course, scenario planning, we have done it. These guys have done it. Okay? And in the Philippines, we also have done it also. Okay? For 5 years, more or less. But we are now moving to a very, not really ambitious, but more or less forward-looking 30 years. Okay? And this is the exciting part because uncertainties abound the 30 years span. Okay?
5 years.
Okay, so that's it. We will be going to stage 1 in the Foresight exercise. Okay? Any questions? The following slides will be for the workshop. No? Stage 1 to stage 2. Okay? Questions? Yes, ma'am.
You referred to Sean Raimundo from NAST and UPLB. You referred to robust strategies.
Yes,
but how can you determine whether they're robust when you don't have data? You have to imagine, you have to envision, and all that.
Okay. You will encounter this around stage 7 or 8 and 9. This is where the beauty lies now. Because advanced na natin konti lamang, no? If you will be connecting all the variables there that creates a scenario, you will see some links that are weak. You will see some links that are strong. Okay? So, if you have the weakest link, what can you do with a weak link? If you have a weak link, you put, yes, you put resources there. You put money, you put scientists, you put technology, you put infrastructure. That is robust. Meaning that, robust means in the sense that it's a snap. Okay? So you can now see a bigger picture. The links, ito, weak to, vulnerable, this is, ayusin natin to. Eventually, you are now actually, what? Polishing the scenario. Okay? Because once you present a scenario, people will be asking you question. How can you solve what are the implications between this variable and this variable? What is the weakest link here? You have to answer that. Okay? And that's why scenario building is a process. It is really, it's like a puzzle. Okay? The whole creative process. I tell you, when I do scenario building with my classes, no. After presenting the scenario building, we have some sort of an open forum. I'll be asking them one by one, how did you feel at stage 2, stage 3, stage 4? They will be, they'll discuss with me, sir, I feel that at first point, we thought that, we were moving around in circles, nothing's going to happen. As we unfold in each scenario or the stages, it becomes clearer to them. And this actually, the creative process comes out actually. The stages are actually tested. I've tested this actually for almost 100 scenario building capstone projects, and eventually, actually, that's the impact that it can get actually. Okay? So for you, for 2 days, it's going to be exciting. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, thank you for your lecture. This is for clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
The outputs for today and tomorrow is not the final output.
Yes, ma'am. Hindi siya.
Okay, so this is going to be just a first run.
Yes,
So everyone who's around.
Hindi ba to?
Yeah.
No.
Because this will go through another series
Yes.
of analysis and
Oo.
scenario building with more people involved
Yes.
for the different
Oo.
areas and things.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, do you think we can do all of those 10 stages as a practice
Yes, ma'am.
for today and tomorrow?
Yes, ma'am. Kaya ang challenge ko sa inyo, we will just be creating one scenario for each team, no? And mind you, after the 10 stages, if you create a scenario, actually, sabi ko, graduation nga yun eh, kasi, 2 days. And the whole point is that it's a mindset that you have already gone through. This is how we do scenario building. This is a process. Of course, there are many variations. Some are doing scenario planning, in which, for example, the technology is already commercialized. Commercialized technology, I don't recommend scenario building, but rather scenario planning. How do you now plan for the firm to absorb this technology? On the other hand, you are scenario building, meaning that what we see now in the different teams right now, we will extract a focal issue. 30 years. Okay, just one focal. There could be, out of those 8 teams, there could be 2, 3, 4 focal issues. But just pick one focal issue for each team. And then basically, why is this a focal issue for the year 2050? Okay, that's the most important thing. So for example, wait lang. Let's say we have health. Ito, health. Ito yung very relevant ngayon to. Okay, what's the focal issue for health? Technology, science, and innovation. What's the focal issue now? Do you think that will still be existing for 30 years? Lumabas dito, early detection and management of common and impending diseases in the country. That's really a focal issue. Di ba? Ano mga diseases andito? Chikungunya? Chikungunya? Ano ba? Dengue? Ano pa? HIV? Ano pa? NCOV, SARS, what else? Cancer, diabetes, ang dami. You name it, we have it here. Can the Philippines exist in the next 30 years with these kinds of diseases? Ask yourself, is that a focal issue? It's really a focal issue. Connected lahat yan. Isang ano lang yan, pero focal issue. What are your plans in the next 30 years? is what, yung ginagawa mo ba ngayong taon na to, 2020, will still be relevant by 2050? Is that the strategy we're doing now still relevant 30 years after? See? And this is actually where the whole point is. It makes you think, just Sherman, di ba? 30 years with these kinds of diseases, what's your imagination?
For me, I would think of some novel diseases, you know, impacting us. Those are the things that we don't know about. So, but how might you be able to uncover, reveal those kinds of possibilities? So, you know, there are tools and methodology that enables you to actually do that. There are in Foresight. So, what's essential really is that, you know, the tools and the process that you're going to employ in the process. So, but if you try to like some sort of imagine, you know, things like cancer, of course that's thematic, right? Like you explore the future of cancer by the year 2050. So you try to imagine the possibilities of cancer, you know, in different alternative futures. So there are process. There are process. Depends on always on the process and the design. And the design, you know, the output is basically different depending on the process that you're using.
Kaya nga, sir, practice lang. Isang scenario lang kikreate natin. Remember, scenario building is actually could be 2, 3, 4. In some exercises, they even have almost 5 to 10 scenarios. No? Kung napaka-complex na, how much complex the focal issue is. They're able to, you know, map it out there. And this is the beauty of scenario building, in fact. 30 years, you don't know what's going to happen. You are preparing a scenario for this. Okay? And that's actually why scenario building has been used by a lot of companies, big companies. And this is actually, sabi ko nga sa'yo, confidential eh. Some of these are, yung mga delicate information are confidential. Tinatago muna yan. Sinasabi muna thematic title, but the intricacies nakatago lahat dyan. Okay. Yes, yes sir.
In agricultural sciences,
yes sir.
It consists of crops, livestock, forestry.
Yeah.
So how could we come up with one focal issue for this diverging elements or compositions of the agricultural sciences?
Okay, so yan, ang ganda yan, no? Complexity, livestock, etc., etc., etc. That's why we have an environmental scan. Okay, what is the environmental scan, which is stage 2? You see now trends there. Trends. What's happening now? What's a trend between these crops and livestock? You have to extract a trend that is common to them. Let's say, for example, are these livestock, crops, etc. declining or increasing? What are these? These are food materials. Yes. See? See, that's our point. You're able to see trends now. Okay, time is up now.
Okay.
Okay na?
Thank you po.
Thank you very much.
Thank you much, Professor Imba. Okay, medyo maya-maya po tayo magla-lunch. Our next topic will be logical framework. Our second speaker is Dr. Segundo Romero. His longest involvement was at the University of the Philippines, professor of political science when he transferred to the Development Academy of the Philippines to become Executive Vice President and Dean of its Graduate School of Public and Development Management from 2002 to 2005. He has served as professorial lecturer in Political Science and Development Studies at the De La Salle University and at the Ateneo de Manila University. Most recently, he was a visiting professor at the Chulalongkorn University. Dr. Romero holds PhD, MA, and AP degrees in political science from the University of the Philippines. Let us all welcome Dr. Romero.
Good morning. I've been stimulated by the discussions kay Dr. Cruz, kay Rod, kay Sherman, at kay Glenn na nakalimutan ko na yung presentation ko eh. Nakagawa na ako ng isa pang presentation. But my main insight is basically because parang gusto natin i-connecta yung futuristics natin where we are. And ito yung tanong ni National Scientist Domingo kanina, current problems versus future problems. One way of looking at it is, I think basically, we are trying to determine how to spend our budget 30 years from now. Because the budget is the distillation of decisions that we take as to where our society will be. And so, one way of looking at it is, what will our budget look like? What are we going to spend money on? Now, of course, you're talking about the public funds. But the reason why that is so is because scenarios are not for everybody. We are doing scenarios because we are on top of big bulldozers, which are our institutions. Shared, NAST, which have big budgets, of course. And we are trying to imagine how these big bulldozers should act in concert to make things happen in the future. Now, the problem is that we don't know what are the things we want to happen in the future. And we are constrained by our imagination. If only we can become more colorful and varied in our imagination of what our future might be, which is what Sherman is telling us we should develop, imagine, then maybe it is easier to accept. Where we are, sabi nga ni Dr. Asansa, our scenarios today are kindergarten scenarios. They will be, I will call them sacrificial concepts. Meaning to say, we throw them out after we formulated them and written them so that people can tear them up and challenge them and improve on them. And inspire them to make their own scenarios. Because the scenarios should really be coming out of Congress. All of those institutions that are supposed to help Congress think of what the future might be. The scenarios in Malaysia were generally government scenarios. It was the government as guardian of society trying to imagine what might the future be. The same with us. Now the problem is, we are not even policymakers of government who are directly holding power. It should be Panelo, it should be I'm sorry, for the first name I mentioned, but all of these cabinet members should be involved in scenario making. The problem is because they look at themselves as guardians with terms of duty. Di ba? Tour of duty, I'm sorry. Hindi na nila tinitignan yung beyond ng tour of duty nila. The same with our politicians, which is why nobody does scenarios, because ang tour of duty ko hanggang 2022 lang. Di ba? Now that's a problem. So we are presuming to help them think beyond their tours of duty. I think that's what we're trying to do. So basically what we're doing is a sacrificial concept. But hopefully it wakes up the country to the importance of scenarios. And it's really basically using scenarios to get our act together. Because once you imagine a future and it is sold, and everybody buys into it, then you can backcast and say, oh, okay, so kung ganitong gusto natin, ito ang kailangan natin gawin para makadating tayo doon. From the science point of view, it's really, where now what we do is try to predict a dependent variable from a set of independent variables, right? O, alam mo na yung independent variables mo, then what will be the predicted value of your dependent variable? Here, we're trying to conjure a dependent variable, hopefully different from what we can imagine, and try to say, ano yung independent variables mo na gagawa nito? Which is the reverse, right? Imagine the consequence and then move backwards towards the independent variables or explanatory variables. And that is a kind of thinking that is so far away for us. Why? We work with Patriot scholars, kami ni Dr. Cruz. We go around telling our young Patriot scholars to give back to the country. Akala nila yung 7,000 na binibigay sa kanila ng SEI to save their families from poverty. It's not. We tell them this is an investment in you. There are 33,000 of you. Undergraduate, they get 7,000. MA, they get 28,000. PhD, they get 35,000, 36,000 per month, paid for by the Philippine government. There are 33,000 of them. And then they imagine it's just to save their family from poverty. It's not. It's an investment in you so that you go back in there and pluck the rest of your community out. So we have a scenario there, right? We have a scenario of how we can get people out. But when we bring these students, they cannot imagine even the present. When we meet them with poor communities, nag-iiyakan sila. Sabi nila, ngayon ko lang nakita yan. They talk to women, men, youth, PWDs, and then they realize, hindi ko na-imagine na ganyan pala. You're even talking about the present. You're not even talking about the future. You're just imagining what is happening in the country, and we don't have that. How can you imagine the future? You cannot even imagine the present. And which is why many of our students from UP, once they get exposed to the realities of the present that they cannot imagine, they switch and join the NPA. Diba? Which is, they become rebels, right? So what I'm really saying here is that we should also imagine the process of imagining from where we are. Diba? And I think that is, in other words, it's a selling job. Okay, we come up with a scenario, but how do we sell? Scenario making. And in the Philippines, when you say bahala na, that is really the formula for rejecting scenarios. Diba? And the scenarios we want are collective societal scenarios. Because the rich people, they have their own scenarios and they are very good at it. So the main problem with scenario making is that the individual rich people make their scenarios, the rest of the people do not. And we who are supposed to help the people are not doing enough. I mean, tayo, di ba? Because our bulldozers are academic research bulldozers. We don't go into the bulldozers that really work on society. The earth movers, DSWD, DPWH, and so on. Anyway, but when we look at log frames, these are really tools for structuring and attaining goals, right? Structuring and attaining goals. Assuming that you already have a goal. Once you have a goal, societal goal, like reduce crime, then we can use the log frame. Which is why the log frame will come after the scenario building. Okay? Define mo muna yung goal mo. Then we will structure it to make it happen. It's just like really backcasting. But in this country, we lack what I will call Coliseum thinking. Meaning to say, in a Coliseum, di ba? Nakikita mo lahat ng tao. Di ba? Imagine the Philippine arena. Di ba? You can see everybody else. So there is visual alignment. You know what everybody else is doing. It's transparency and accountability. Dito sa Pilipinas, we are pillarized. We are in small rooms. Hindi natin nakikita yung ginagawa ng bawat isa. And, well, unless we are in a large coliseum, that will not happen. That visual is not available to us. In fact, in the University Council, how many members are there in the University Council when it meets in Diliman? Lumalampas ba ng 2,000 yan? Face-to-face? So what is the biggest face-to-face event that you can attend? Where you can reason out with people? The only way you can align the work of people is through a device called a log frame. Okay? And it's a poor substitute for face-to-face meetings. And so I'll show you what the log frame is. By the way, we used to have a project called Population, Resources, Environment, and the Philippine Future. There is a book. I don't know whether 1975, 1976. This was the time when the Development Academy of the Philippines produced the Social Indicators Project. Before, we knew what poverty was, but we could not measure it. It took the Social Indicators Project of DAP, sinamahar mga has, right, to be able to measure it and tell us, aha, nakatayan sa caloric intake 2,000 calories. That's the first time we realized how many people were poor. Because without that threshold, we only knew it as a concept. Ngayon, kaya na natin sabihin, oh, we want it lower to 15%, 16%. But before 1975, we didn't have that. But this was part of that research that came out during Marshall Youth. So we need to look into this because here we are now doing scenarios when in fact there was an earlier one. It was earlier than what the Malaysians did. In fact, I hear before that the Malaysian 2020 visioning, there were Filipino consultants there that were helping them. Okay, so it's not as if it's new. But ang problema natin is that wala tayong knowledge management. I mean, hindi natin pinagkakabit-kabit yung produkto ng mga generations. And we forget them and then we start again. So you have that. And then we forget, because everybody has interest, that eventually, there are just basically three things we want. And maybe these are things we need to look at. For instance, my take is, we want inclusive security. Inclusive is a very important term. Dito talaga natitisod yung government. Right? We have growth, but it's not for everybody. We have good health, it's not for everybody. It's really inclusiveness. And we are challenged because we are archipelagic. Right? And in an archipelago, you really cannot have the kind of uniform, fluent policies. Now, inclusive security, making all lives matter, inclusive development, making all dreams reachable, basically education, right? And then, inclusive governance, making all voices count. We're looking at types of futures. Diba? There are plausible, probable, preferable, and we are so prone to disasters, we might as well really use this. The reason why this is in vogue now is because 9/11 happened to the US. They never thought it was going to happen. Diba? That you're going to have two planes hit the two towers and bring them to the ground. Nobody imagined that. Which is why now everybody, if it's plausible, let's scenario it. Okay? O tayo. After Marawi, do we imagine it's the last one that's going to happen? Because of Marawi, there is so much recruitment happening now. Why? Because the Maranaos have not been given Marami back. And so maybe these are the things we should be scenarioing. And then you scenario your VFA being removed, so you remove your eyes and ears. Okay? But anyway, so we have to decide on what are our scenarios, but we have to have a good choice, diba? A good deck of cards. So, and shaping the future using a log frame is what this particular segment is about. So, let me just, anyway, andito yung sinasabi nila kanina. But in the end, agreeing on strategic action to take today is what log framing is all about. No, so I'll just skip this. By the way, there's a delightful book by Edward de Bono. I think you have read this. It's about 6 thinking hats. Right? It's about trying to be a person with, or a group with 6 different personalities and trying to put together the perspectives of those personalities to make a good decision. So maybe that's also what decision making is all about. There is a pessimistic you, there is an optimistic you, there is a data-driven you, there is a happy you, and so on. So, log framing is about cathedral thinking, right? But overall, what exactly do we want to come up with? And just to imagine, for instance, we are trying to move our pyramid into a diamond. Just to imagine from a societal level, what are you trying to do? One scenario is you want to move your pyramid into a diamond. How do you do that? Well, you lock off people at your base of the pyramid and shift them to the middle class. How do you do that? Well, conditional cash transfers is one of them. Universal education is one of them. So innovations are needed to sculpt society. But this is the kind of visioning that helps people imagine what is the society moving towards. And in our future work, in Future Earth Philippines with Dr. Luli Cruz, we've been doing these kinds of strategizing, trying to imagine what are the guiding principles, what are the interventions, and what do we want to attain to have good health, healthy natural environment, and so on. So these are some of the ingredients of scenarios that we have been working on. The Philippine Development Plan is also a staging point for scenarios. Now, log framing is structuring and scheduling goals for attainment. So basically, it's just a one sheet of paper with these cells. It's a 4x4 matrix, and here you have your goal, and I always imagine it to look like a envisioned societal impact. What is the societal impact you want? Then, what is your organizational outcome? Target organizational outcome. And then, this one is what is your project output? And then, what are the tasks you need to do? So, in other words, if you have a societal impact, for instance, inclusive development or reduce crime, then that goal gets divided and distributed across all of those institutions and peoples and teams trying to contribute towards that. And maybe NAST can have an organizational purpose or target outcome that contributes to inclusive development. Maybe develop science and technology, improve the number, increase the number of scientists, and so on, right? And then maybe here at the project level, like this project, which is a futuristic or futures mapping or foresighting problem project. Does this foresighting problem or project contribute to the objective of NAS to increase the number of scientists? And will the increase of scientists improve inclusive development? And what are the tasks do you need to do to be able to complete this project? So the tasks contribute to project output. Project output contribute to organizational outcomes, and organizational outcomes contribute to societal impact. You might, of course, put an ASEAN goal there, right? Regional development. But let's just look at this. But if you do this, it's as if you are in a coliseum. You can see what everybody else is doing and how they are contributing to the main goal, which we don't have now. But if you do this lab frame, for instance, if you just define your goals and they are already in your Philippine development plan, make sure that all of the organizations specify what they are contributing to, right? And what their projects are contributing to their goal, and the tasks that they identify, that they fund, are contributing to the objectives. So that is what we call the vertical logic. One of the two logics of the log frame. Now, but that is motherhood statements, unless you bring in the horizontal logic. The horizontal logic is your control logic. They make things happen. Why? Because for every goal, purpose, objective, task, that second column says, what are your objective indicators and what are your targets? You have to specify that. For instance, inclusive development, maybe our indicator is reduce poverty by 5%, right? Now, if that is your goal, how will increasing your scientists contribute to a reduction of 5%? And how will this foresighting contribute to the increase of scientists? And why will this particular task, this workshop, contribute to foresighting? So, you have your indicators and targets. The next one is means of verification. What is the evidence that you have achieved this, right? Because government, sometimes we do the action and we also report on our own, evaluate our own work. Like the police, the PNP might say, tell us how crime has been reduced. Is that the best? Is the PNP in the best position to tell us the percentage reduction in crime? But the most important one is the last one, assumptions. Because in assumptions, this is where you ask, what can go wrong? And this is, a lot of things can go wrong if you make the wrong assumptions or you are not prepared for it. You're coming up with a goal that is really out of sight. So this is where you say, these are the things that can go wrong, and this is where you now try to say, okay, how will you manage the things that will go wrong? So with this vertical logic and the horizontal logic, and if everybody does this, and if you have a big enough supercomputer, then you can have an idea of how they are all aligned. But of course, you still have a lot of strategic planning, but there is at least a transparency and accountability device that will make us work together as we move over time, because we might be aligned now, but once we start on the journey, we get misaligned because the pace of change will be different. So how to be aligned and move in an aligned organization as we move through time, that is very difficult. Now you look at the Philippine military, Army, Navy, Air Force, and they constantly try to do interoperability. They are already the same military, but they have to come up with rehearsals and exercises. So I think that tells us so much of our effort. Agriculture, Picard, and all of this, the agricultural community, how much do they talk? Our defense community and our foreign affairs community, our scientific community and our engineers and things like that. So those are the things that we need to work on, and the strengths and weaknesses will be shown by your lab frames as you evaluate them. Okay, so anyway, so a lab frame is the project dashboard. It's an intent structure or logic. It's a control structure. It is a participatory multi-stakeholder project design tool. It's a tool for workshopping and getting all of the stakeholders involved so they buy into it. Because if you just design it and then throw it to your staff, it's not going to happen. It has to be participatory. And a lab frame is the gateway and basis for more detailed project planning. And different projects have different outputs measured in different ways. In the Philippines, we report on activities, we don't report on outcomes and outputs. We report how many vehicles we have purchased. We report how many meetings and workshops we have done. We report on how many staff we have hired, but we don't report on level of education, futures literacy, and things like that. But if you look at government reporting, it's basically input side. So, just to illustrate the lab frame, I have 2 minutes. Imagine the PNP. Let's say, ang objective nila, envision societal impact is reduce crime. Is that a good enough societal impact? Okay, reduce crime. What is the target organizational outcome of PNP? Let's say it's increased police visibility. Okay, at the organizational level. At the project level, their target output is new police graduates. Diba? And major tasks, design course, recruit cadets, conduct course, give final exam, for graduation. Are these necessary to make that happen? Yes. Will new police graduates increase police visibility? Logically, yes. Will increased political visibility lead to reduced crime? Logically, yes. Right? If the numbers are correct, means of verification, then you have this. But you look at what can go wrong. Just at the level of, you look at that, expected project output, what can go wrong? Reduction in recruits due to hazing deaths in prior year. So suddenly your recruitment rate is lower. So then the question is, how do you make up and get the number of recruits you need? Well, my answer, just imagining, is you lower the height requirement for recruits from 5'2" to 5 feet. Temporarily, right? Temporarily. Then you will have the same. But the other problem is increased police visibility. What can go wrong? The new police are assigned to desk jobs due to lack of mobile cars. Diba? So, you increase the number, but you didn't increase police visibility because you lacked the mobility logistics for them. Okay, so can you imagine? I tell my students, you can do this for yourself. Once Glenn's workshops produce for us those hierarchical objectives and vision societal impact, then we can do this exercise. Okay, and we have enough experience in this room to be able to just come up with a reasonable prototype of what this will be like. And of course, part of it is really going into performance measure. What kind of indicators? There are so many ways of coming up with indicators, presence or absence, but you can have input measures, output, workload measures, efficiency, effectiveness, productivity, so on. And this is what we want to happen, right? When they jump out of the plane, they're all one by one, but before they reach the ground, they have to be connected. It can be done. If these people can do it, we can do it. But they have the device of visual. I mean, they can see one another. Because in a society of 110 million, you cannot see what everybody else is doing. One way of doing it is aligned using a hierarchy of log frames. And of course, I was going to show diagnostic tools, but that has already been covered. But basically, the log frame allows us to simulate a coliseum where everybody can see everybody else. It's a transparency and accountability tool. It's also a performance tool. It reduces thrash. And my sense is in this country we've been thrashing about. I mean, there is so much thrashing about, and we really don't get too much work done because our objectives and our alignment of objectives is very fuzzy. And logical thinking will improve that. We have started this using your OPIF, remember? Organizational Performance Indicator Framework. And at the local government level, Local Government Performance Management System. So we've started, but we have not really brought them to the point where they are controlling of our individual and collective behavior. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
According to our agreement with Dr. Romero, is we're going to have lunch first, and after that, we will have the open forum. Okay po ba sa inyo? So lunch is okay. Sabay na, working lunch daw, you're not allowed to eat. Hindi sir, questions daw po. But those of you would like to get food, pwede naman po, and then, baka pwede po kumuha muna kayo ng food, and then we can start the discussion. Kuha na din, sir, kayo. Papakainin namin kayo for 5 minutes. Okay. Lunch po is 2:30.